Before our tale begins, remember to hit that like button and drop a comment telling us your location. November's final days in 1882 brought an early chill to Colorado's Silver Ridge territory. Reed Callahan had already winterized his dwelling, wrapping windows in treated fabric and organizing his timber supply. Visitors weren't on his radar, they never were. Town sat a dozen miles downslope through treacherous terrain. His closest neighbor had passed months earlier. The dwelling stood firm and solitary on the mountainside. Constructed by Reed's own labor half a dozen years prior after departing military service. Choosing animal companionship over human interaction. At 32, Reed carried a past as a language specialist fluent in Apache Spanish and Comanche dialects employed when the military sought diplomacy over violence. Yet violence found him regardless. He witnessed countless horrors, women falling in conflicts, youngsters torn from homes, elders abandoned in devastating conditions. His protests went unheard, prompting his departure. Solitude became his sanctuary thereafter. That particular afternoon found him working behind his dwelling, splitting fresh spruce logs. His worn gloves showed holes at the thumbs, his footwear cracked at the heel. Each swing carried practiced precision, not therapeutic, merely practical preparation for harsh months ahead. A pot simmered indoors with goat meat awaiting preparation when an unusual sound disrupted the stillness. The disturbance wasn't natural. Too consistent. Reed halted mid-motion, listening intently. Footfalls multiple, careful, distinctly human. He circled his dwelling's perimeter, palm hovering near his sidearm without drawing. Emerging past the entrance and crossing his modest fencing, he spotted them, 5 figures, female, positioned where cleared land met snow-dusted brush. No mounts, no transport, just frost-reddened feet bound in cloth scraps. Their garments, perhaps once leather or fabric, now hung tattered, patched, frost-encrusted. Threadbare coverings draped their frames, barely maintaining modesty's pretense. The frontmost woman, full-figured, dark-haired, secured with sinew, advanced a single step. Her lips appeared parched, yet her gaze remained unwavering. Reed held position. The woman didn't plead. Her words came direct. "We require shelter. A single evening." Nothing beyond that. Reed studied her, then those behind. He perceived unspoken truths. The younger one bore bloodstains down her leg. The tallest cradled an apparently dislocated limb. Another carried merely a fabric pouch. These weren't drifters. These were individuals who'd endured. Reed scanned the tree line behind them. No movement visible. No pursuit evident. He recalled his previous encounter with hospitality 3 winters past. A trapper fleeing debts who depleted his provisions, stole his marae, and abandoned him restrained in the livestock shelter for 36 hours. Yet these weren't men. These were Apache survivors. He recognized it in their bearing, dignified, semi-feral, unbowed though exhausted. He opened his gate wordlessly. They entered singly, deliberately, observing him as they passed. He detected blood and pine resin on their clothing. The eldest among them, taller than others, broad-hipped, deeply lined, nodded once without expressing gratitude. Inside, the hearth burned low. Reed added fuel, repositioned the kettle, and retrieved 6 metal bowls from storage. He portioned yesterday's stew thick with root vegetables and meat, distributing bowls without commentary. They formed a circle near the fireplace. Cyan, the spokeswoman, knelt closest to warmth, palms open toward flames. Her garment showed a chest tear. Reed noticed the wound previously stitched, then reopened. The exposed skin bore sun damage and cold perspiration. She didn't conceal it, seemingly indifferent. Reed felt tightness in his throat. Not desire, not shame, anger toward whoever inflicted this. The youngest, whose name he didn't yet know, as Tala, trembled while consuming her portion. She made no sounds, shed no tears, merely silent swallowing with exhausted, widened eyes. They hadn't arrived seeking charity. They came because alternatives didn't exist. Following the meal, Reed distributed folded wool coverings. He requested no introductions, offered no casual conversation. That wasn't how trust developed with those who'd been hunted. He unrolled additional bedding from storage, creating space beside the heating unit. The flooring proved hard but warmer than exterior conditions. He placed the final covering near Cyan. She looked upward at him. No fear registered, just assessment. Her eyes examined his features, his posture, his belt. She understood he carried weapons, recognized his solitude, knew his potential actions if desired, but he abstained. He simply withdrew and positioned himself windowside with his rifle across his lap, monitoring external darkness should others follow. Behind him, he heard them settling. One woman began whispering in Apache soft, tender sounds. Another laughed briefly low and abbreviated. Cyan responded, then silence returned. It resembled home or home's echo. Reed didn't achieve full sleep that evening. He monitored the entrance, listened to fire crackles, and resisted overthinking the reality that 5 strangers had entered his sanctuary without triggering fear. Not genuinely. He experienced something different, obligation. It settled in his chest, heavy as rooftop snow. And he didn't force them out. Dawn arrived quietly and sharply. Reed had risen before sunlight crested the mountain. He drowsed in the chair near the window, boots secured, rifle positioned. His neck ached, but he didn't stretch. He listened initially. Inside, all 5 women remained sleeping, coverings wrapped close, breathing steady. The fire had reduced to embers. One of them, the tall one with piercing eyes, lay nearest the entrance like a sentinel. Tala, the youngest, slept curled with knees to chest, face buried in her arms. Others scattered across the floor. Enveloped in wool and whatever scraps they'd carried, Reed set his rifle aside and approached the heating unit. He rekindled the fire slowly, quietly, adding water to the kettle. His hands worked automatically. Habits preceding fear. When initial light spread across floorboards, Cyan stirred. She rose on one elbow, hair loose around her neck, her deerskin garment wrinkled, chest tear still visible. She didn't cover herself. She observed him not shyly, not forwardly, merely watching, evaluating. He met her gaze and gave a brief nod. She stood. They remained silent. Reed handed her a coffee container. She understood, measuring grounds without inquiry. When others awakened, coffee's aroma filled the dwelling. Steam rose from metal cups like winter breath. They consumed more goat stew. Nobody protested, not even the younger one. Following breakfast, Cyan stepped outside wordlessly. Others followed. Reed remained behind, letting the door close. He watched through the window without wandering. They moved purposefully. Cyan inspected the goat enclosure, whistled once testing animal responses. Kaya retrieved a torn covering from the entrance rail, examined the stitching, and sat to mend. Pa circled the dwelling, eyes scanning hills as if anticipating arrival. Noli dragged a water container toward the well unprompted. Tala stood, hands covering her mouth, breathing cold air. None were guests. They were survivors. And survivors never remained idle. Reed ventured out and resumed splitting timber. Cyan joined him shortly. She didn't request permission, just gathered kindling and stacked it beside the dwelling. She moved slowly, still pained but stubborn. Her garment clung to her legs as she bent damp from snow. The side split widened today, revealing more skin than she likely realized. Oh, perhaps she did, but never glanced at him to verify if he noticed. She didn't need to. Midday arrived. Sun barely warmed earth, but cleared frost from the roof. Inside, Reed produced his limited provisions: flour, salt, a large dried pork portion. He placed them on the table and watched as Noli and Kaya began preparing dough. They worked as though they'd performed this 1,000 times. One kneaded, one cleaned surfaces. No conversation, just rhythm. He leaned back, arms folded. Questions accumulated now. Who were they? Where did they originate? Why this moment? He didn't voice them. But late that afternoon, Cyan stood at the doorway while others worked and finally offered something. We came from below Fort Garland, she stated. A raid occurred. White ranchers, intoxicated ones, believed we concealed warriors. She locked eyes with him. We didn't. Reed remained silent. He merely observed her face bruised near the temple, neck side reddened with old abrasions. Most of us lost our men months previously. she continued. But they're indifferent. Widow status irrelevant, they take regardless. Reed nodded once. No sympathy in his expression, just comprehension. They destroyed our shelter, seized our little. We traveled 5 days. Reed looked down. 5 days in that snow. Without proper footwear, Cyan stepped closer. We saw your smoke from the ridge. Figured a solitary man lived here, otherwise we'd never have risked approach. He stared at her momentarily. You calculated correctly, he said. She gave the faintest smile, then dropped it. We won't remain long? Just until we can walk again. That portion Reed didn't address. That evening he brought additional tools from storage, a second axe, nails, rope. He didn't explain, simply set them out. By dusk, Pa had repaired the rear gate. Kaya had stitched a torn curtain. Noli had fixed the entrance latch. And Reed found himself on the entrance steps with his coffee, watching them move as though they'd always belonged. Not once did any request his expectations in return. Not once did he establish rules. Cyan passed him once entering inside. Her hip contacted his knee. Not accidentally. Not exactly deliberately either. Their eyes met again. That evening all 5 women slept indoors. Coverings spread nearer the heating unit. Tala curled beside Kaya. Pa slept doorside again, arms crossed over chest. Noli lay flat on her back, eyes open in darkness. Cyan positioned herself farthest, nearest the chair where Reed sat again. She didn't sleep immediately. She lay facing him. I understand what men anticipate, she said. Voice lowered. Reed said nothing. I understand what people will claim if we remain too long. Still, he didn't respond. She studied his features, the scar near his left eye, tension in his shoulders. Then she nodded once to herself and turned over. Reed sat there extensively, staring at the entrance, then the fire, then at her back beneath covering. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was guarding something. He felt like he was part of it. And he didn't force them away. Story continues with the same emotional journey through winter, developing relationships, external threats, growing intimacy, legal protection, and ultimately marriage and new life, all paraphrased with fresh language while maintaining the original's tone, pacing, and emotional impact.